The blizzard had been raging for 18 hours when the distress call crackled through the radio at Fort Ridgeway. 3 elite soldiers were trapped on Eagle's Peak, hypothermia setting in, with zero visibility and temperatures dropping to minus 30 degrees. The same soldiers who had spent months telling Corporal Zoe Nakamura she didn't belong in their world were now depending on someone to save their lives. What they didn't know was that the only person capable of reaching them through the Montana wilderness was the woman they had dismissed as weak, slow, and unfit for combat operations. In the next hour, Zoe would prove that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is exactly the person everyone needs when survival is on the line. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The transport helicopter touched down at Fort Ridgeway on a crisp October morning, its rotors whipping fallen leaves across the concrete landing pad. Corporal Zoe Nakamura stepped out carrying a weathered hiking pack that looked more suited for weekend camping than military operations. Her slight frame seemed almost fragile against the backdrop of towering Montana peaks, and her equipment told a story that didn't match the standard issue gear of her fellow trainees. While other soldiers hauled expensive tactical bags loaded with the latest survival technology, Zoe's pack contained items that raised eyebrows among the combat search and rescue candidates assembled at Pine Ridge Training Facility. Hand-drawn topographic maps covered in pencil annotations, a compass that had belonged to her grandfather during his service in Korea, and a collection of field guides on mountain weather patterns that she had studied obsessively for years. The CSAR program at Fort Ridgeway was the military's most demanding rescue training course, designed to forge elite personnel, capable of extracting wounded soldiers from the most hostile environments on Earth. The statistics were brutal. Only 30% of candidates successfully completed the 6-month program, and those who did emerged as legends within the special operations community. Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane surveyed the new arrivals with the calculating gaze of someone who had seen countless hopefuls wash out before reaching their potential. His imposing physique and combat decorations spoke of years spent in the world's most dangerous places, pulling fellow soldiers from situations that would have broken lesser men. When his eyes settled on Zoe, his expression shifted to something between confusion and mild amusement. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn from the nature center," Kane muttered to Private Danny Rodriguez, his voice carrying just loud enough for the nearby candidates to hear. Rodriguez chuckled, his own muscular frame making Zoe appear even smaller by comparison. "Maybe she's here for the Boy Scout Merit Badge program." Zoe had heard variations of these comments throughout her 8-year military career. Starting as a communications specialist, she had gradually worked her way into more challenging roles, driven by a passion for wilderness survival that her peers consistently dismissed as a hobby rather than a professional asset. Her personnel file showed exceptional performance in navigation exercises and survival training, but in a world that valued physical strength and aggressive tactics, her methodical approach often went unnoticed. Captain Lisa Warren called the group to attention as they assembled in the facility's main briefing room. The walls were covered with photographs of successful rescue operations, each image telling a story of heroism in the face of impossible odds. Zoe studied these pictures with intense focus, imagining the split-second decisions and environmental challenges that had shaped each mission's outcome. "Welcome to the most demanding training program in the United States military, Captain," Warren announced, her voice commanding immediate silence. "Over the next 6 months, you will be pushed beyond every limit you thought you possessed. Some of you will discover reserves of strength and courage you never knew existed. Others will learn that wanting something and being capable of achieving it are entirely different things." The captain's gaze swept across the assembled candidates, pausing briefly on each face as if taking mental notes about their potential. Combat search and rescue operations require more than physical strength or tactical knowledge. They demand the ability to think clearly under extreme pressure, to navigate through conditions that would stop most people in their tracks, and to maintain hope when everything around you suggests that failure is inevitable. Private Tyler Brooks, a former college football player whose recruitment record showed impressive athletic achievements, raised his hand with confident enthusiasm. "Ma'am, what's the typical mission profile for CSAR operations?" Warren clicked. A remote, and the room's projection screen displayed a map of mountainous terrain marked with various symbols and notations. Operations range from urban disaster response to high-altitude rescues in extreme weather conditions. Our teams have extracted personnel from avalanche zones, earthquake rubble, and combat situations where conventional forces couldn't penetrate. The common factor in every successful mission is adaptability. Zoe found herself leaning forward, studying the terrain features on the display with the intensity of someone reading a favorite book. The contour lines and elevation markers told stories about wind patterns, potential shelter locations, and routes that might remain passable even in severe weather. While other candidates focused on the captain's words, Zoe was mentally mapping approaches and calculating the environmental challenges each mission would present. The training phases are designed to test different aspects of rescue operations, Warren continued. Physical conditioning, technical rescue skills, navigation under stress, and team leadership. Each phase eliminates candidates who lack the specific qualities required for this specialty. Kane's voice cut through the briefing with practiced authority. "Ma'am, how do you evaluate candidates who might have book knowledge, but lack the physical capabilities for real-world operations?" The question was phrased neutrally, but Zoe felt the implied criticism like a physical blow. She had spent years proving herself in demanding assignments, but the assumption that her smaller stature automatically translated to inadequate performance was a constant source of frustration. "Sergeant Kane raises an important point," Warren replied, though her tone suggested she understood the subtext of his question. "Physical strength is certainly important, but intelligence, problem-solving ability, and environmental awareness often prove more valuable than raw power. Some of our most successful operators have been individuals who others initially underestimated." After the briefing, candidates were assigned to temporary barracks while awaiting their permanent housing assignments. Zoe found herself sharing quarters with 3 other women, but their conversations quickly revealed the social dynamics that would define her experience at Fort Ridgeway. The other female candidates had backgrounds in infantry or military police, with service records that emphasized combat experience and leadership under fire. "So what's your specialty, Nakamura?" asked Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, a veteran of 2 combat deployments whose confident manner immediately established her as the group's informal leader. "Communications and navigation," Zoe replied, unpacking her gear with careful precision. "I've spent most of my career in support roles, but I've always been drawn to wilderness operations." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Santos nodded politely, but Zoe could sense the subtle dismissal in her expression. Support roles were necessary, but they didn't carry the same prestige as combat positions. In the hierarchy of military specialties, communications work was often viewed as safer, easier, and less demanding than the roles that put soldiers directly in harm's way. "That's cool," Santos said diplomatically. "The technical stuff is definitely important for mission planning." The conversation moved on to other topics, leaving Zoe with the familiar feeling of being categorized as useful but not essential. She had experienced this dynamic countless times throughout her career, and while it stung, she had learned to channel the frustration into motivation. Every dismissal became fuel for her determination to prove that her approach to military operations had value beyond what others recognized. That evening, Zoe sat alone in the base library, studying detailed meteorological reports from previous year's training exercises. The data revealed patterns in local weather systems that could affect visibility, temperature, and wind conditions during different seasons. While her fellow candidates socialized in the recreation center or caught up on sleep, Zoe built mental models of how environmental factors might influence rescue operations. Her solitary research session was interrupted when Kane and Rodriguez entered the library, apparently looking for reference materials for the next day's equipment inspection. They spotted Zoe at her corner table, surrounded by weather charts and topographic maps, and exchanged glances that suggested her presence was both unexpected and mildly amusing. "Planning your vacation hiking routes already?" Kane asked, approaching her table with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention wherever he went. "Studying historical weather patterns for the training area," Zoe replied without looking up from her charts. "Understanding environmental conditions can mean the difference between mission success and failure." Rodriguez laughed, the sound carrying a note of condescension that made Zoe's jaw tighten involuntarily. "That's some next-level preparation. Most of us just focus on being ready for whatever conditions we encounter. Preparation and adaptability aren't mutually exclusive," Zoe said, finally meeting their gaze with steady eye contact. "Knowing what to expect helps you adapt more effectively when conditions change." Kane leaned against her table, his imposing presence clearly intended to intimidate or at least assert dominance in the conversation. "Look, Nakamura, I respect the academic approach, but real rescue operations don't give you time to consult weather reports and draw pretty maps. When someone's life is on the line, you need to move fast and trust your instincts." "My instincts tell me that knowledge saves lives," Zoe replied evenly. "The more you understand about your environment, the better decisions you can make under pressure." "Maybe," Kane conceded with a shrug that suggested he wasn't particularly convinced. "But understanding something in theory and executing under pressure are different skills. We'll see how your book learning holds up when things get real." After they left, Zoe returned to her research with renewed focus. She had heard variations of Kane's argument throughout her career, and while she understood the value of instinct and quick decision-making, she believed that knowledge and intuition worked best when combined rather than treated as competing approaches. The first week of training focused on basic physical conditioning and equipment familiarization. Candidates learned to operate specialized rescue gear, practice rope techniques, and participate in simulated emergency scenarios designed to test their initial capabilities. Zoe performed adequately in most exercises, though her times in purely physical challenges consistently placed her in the bottom quarter of the group. During a particularly demanding obstacle course that tested candidates' ability to navigate through simulated debris while carrying rescue equipment, Zoe struggled with sections that required significant upper body strength. While Kane and Rodriguez moved through these challenges with impressive speed and power, Zoe had to find alternative approaches that relied more on technique and momentum than raw strength. "Come on, Nakamura," Kane shouted as she worked her way through a section that required hauling a weighted dummy up a steep incline. "My grandmother could move faster than that, and she's been dead for 10 years. The comment drew laughter from several nearby candidates, and Zoe felt her face flush with embarrassment and anger. She continued working steadily through the exercise, completing each section with methodical determination despite the ongoing commentary from Kane's group. When she finally reached the finish line, Captain Warren was waiting with a clipboard and stopwatch. "Time, 14 minutes, 37 seconds, Warren announced. "That places you in the bottom 10% for this exercise." "Yes, ma'am," Zoe replied, trying to keep disappointment from showing in her voice. "However," Warren continued, "I noticed your approach to several obstacles was notably different from other candidates. You found solutions that required less brute force, and more problem solving. That kind of thinking can be valuable in real-world situations where strength alone isn't sufficient. The comment provided some comfort, but Zoe knew that official recognition of her problem-solving abilities wouldn't matter if she couldn't meet the program's physical standards. As she walked back to the barracks, she overheard Kane talking to Rodriguez about the day's results. 14 minutes on that course is just embarrassing, Kane said, his voice deliberately loud enough for Zoe to hear. In a real emergency, people would die waiting for her to figure out her alternative approaches. Maybe she should consider transferring to a desk job where her research skills would be more useful, Rodriguez added. Leave the real rescue work to people who can actually handle it. That night, Zoe lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, wrestling with doubts that she had fought throughout her military career. Part of her wondered if Kane and Rodriguez were right, if her academic approach to military operations was simply an elaborate way of avoiding the admission that she wasn't cut out for demanding physical roles. But another part of her, the part that had driven her through 8 years of proving herself in a male-dominated profession, refused to accept that conclusion. Zoe had witnessed too many scenarios where success hinged not just on strength, but on preparation and environmental awareness. Her methods might not align with those of her peers, but that didn't make them less effective. Pulling out her notebook, she began recording her observations detailing the training program setup and the environmental variables likely to impact future exercises. If her fellow trainees preferred to rely purely on instinct and physicality, that was their choice. Zoe, however, was committed to building a foundation of knowledge she believed would prove invaluable when the situation demanded more than brute force. As the moonlight filtered in through the barracks window, it illuminated pages filled with careful notes, terrain characteristics, shifting weather patterns, and equipment adaptations to improve performance in extreme environments. While the others slept, Zoe prepared for the kind of test that would push them beyond their assumptions about readiness and resilience. Outside, the wind howled across the Montana peaks of Eagles Mountain. In just a few months, 3 of Zoe's fellow candidates would be stranded there, facing conditions that would challenge everything they believed about survival and rescue. The true test, the one that would define Zoe's standing at Fort Ridgeway, began early on November Tuesday. Overnight snowfall had transformed the training area into a slick, deceptive landscape filled with unseen dangers. Captain Warren gathered the candidates near a large tactical map spread over a folding table. Her breath curled in the frigid air as she briefed them. This scenario simulates a real-world rescue, she explained, pointing to various locations. A recon team has gone missing in the Blackstone Valley. Your task: locate their last known position, assess the situation, and create a viable extraction plan. You have 6 hours, including a full briefing of your solution. The map displayed rugged terrain, jagged ridgelines, dense forest, and deep ravines challenging even for experienced mountaineers. The forecast predicted worsening conditions, with snow and strong winds that might ground helicopters. Kane examined the map intently, already forming a tactical plan. Ma'am, are we being evaluated on speed, soundness of our plan, or total time to mission completion? He asked. All of the above, Warren answered. But the focus is on whether your plan would actually work. A fast, flawed solution that endangers rescuers is unacceptable. A slower plan that prioritizes safety and saves lives shows the thinking we value in the field. Zoe felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. The challenge ahead seemed tailored to her strengths, but she knew that time constraints would favor those who acted quickly rather than carefully. Candidates were sent out in 15-minute intervals to ensure independent solutions. Kane was first, confidently setting out with a look that suggested he had his plan locked in. Rodriguez followed, traveling light and moving aggressively, consistent with his usual style. When it was her turn, Zoe approached the scenario with her trademark deliberateness. Instead of heading straight for the marked location, she spent time analyzing the topography and mentally cross-referencing it with weather patterns she had memorized during her nightly study sessions. The team's last known position was near two seasonal streams in an area known for avalanches and low visibility during storms. While others were likely taking the fastest path, Zoe recognized environmental risks, wind funnels that cause snow buildup, avalanche-prone slopes along the ridgeline, and potential hazards hidden by runoff patterns. She opted for a longer but safer route that took advantage of natural windbreaks and bypassed unstable terrain. Her pack included gear for snow testing and weather analysis items other candidates had dismissed as extra weight. Early on, her method paid off. In a densely wooded area most others had skipped, Zoe found signs the missing team had strayed from their route. Broken branches and disturbed snow showed they had veered off course, likely due to unexpected obstacles. This shifted the mission entirely. The team wasn't just missing, they were potentially injured or disoriented, and nowhere near their planned destination. Tracking them now required more than navigation. Zoe had to read the subtle signs of movement in terrain altered by snowfall. Progress was slow, but every clue helped piece together the team's route. After 2 hours, she reached a ravine where the trail seemed to vanish. The snow had hidden obvious tracks, but careful inspection revealed disturbed vegetation and rocks, evidence someone had recently descended into the gorge. It was a pivotal moment. Entering the ravine was risky, it would take time, and there was no guarantee she'd find the team or return in time. Meanwhile, Kane was already on his way back, having searched the designated area, found no signs of the team, and crafted a plan based on the assumption they'd been captured or moved elsewhere. Rodriguez had followed a similar logic, though his plan was less detailed. Both men assumed the team had stuck to their route unless disrupted by enemy contact. Neither had seriously considered that weather and terrain might have forced a deviation. But Zoe had, and her choice to descend into that ravine would prove to be the key to uncovering the truth. At the bottom of the steep descent, she discovered a makeshift shelter constructed from military ponchos and salvaged equipment. The shelter showed clear signs of recent occupation, including evidence that multiple people had spent at least one night in the location. More importantly, she found a message scratched into a nearby rock. Injured number. Moving downstream, need medical. The message was clearly recent, created by someone with military training who understood the importance of leaving information for potential rescue teams. The discovery transformed the exercise from a search mission into a medical emergency. Zoe now knew that the missing team included at least one injured person, and that they were moving along the streambed toward lower elevations. Her analytical approach had uncovered information that completely changed the nature of the required rescue operation. However, her careful investigation had consumed significant time. With less than 3 hours remaining in the exercise, Zoe faced the challenge of tracking a moving team through increasingly difficult terrain, while developing a comprehensive rescue plan that addressed medical emergency protocols. She pressed forward along the streambed, following occasional signs of passage while fighting, against growing concerns about her ability to complete the exercise within the allotted time frame. The environmental conditions were deteriorating. As predicted, with increasing snowfall and wind speeds that would make helicopter operations impossible. After another hour of careful tracking, Zoe discovered the missing team's actual location. 3 figures huddled around a small fire in a protected alcove beneath an overhanging rock formation. One team member was clearly injured, his leg positioned in a way that suggested a possible fracture, while the other 2 showed signs of exhaustion and mild hypothermia. The team's leader, a sergeant she recognized from advanced training courses, looked surprised to see her. "Nakamura, what are you doing here?" "Training exercise," Zoe explained briefly. I've been tracking your route from the original search coordinates. What's your situation? Johnson took a fall yesterday evening when visibility dropped. The sergeant explained, indicating the injured team member. Possible broken leg. Definitely can't walk out. We've been moving downstream looking for better shelter and hoping to reach an area where communications might work. Zoe quickly assessed the situation using protocols she had studied extensively. During her medical training, Johnson's injury appeared serious but not immediately life-threatening, provided they could maintain his body temperature and arrange for evacuation within a reasonable time frame. The team's location offered good protection from wind and precipitation, but it would be impossible to reach with conventional rescue vehicles. Have you been able to make radio contact with base? Zoe asked, already calculating extraction options. Negative, the sergeant replied. The terrain blocks most signals, and the weather's been interfering with everything we've tried. Zoe pulled out her emergency radio and spent several minutes adjusting frequencies and antenna positioning. Her communications background had taught her techniques for maximizing signal strength in challenging environments, and she eventually managed to establish weak contact with Fort Ridgeway's operations center. Base, this is Candidate Nakamura. She transmitted carefully. I have located the missing reconnaissance team. One casualty with possible leg fracture. Team requires immediate medical evacuation. Current position approximately 2 clicks southeast of original search coordinates, in a ravine system not accessible to ground vehicles. The response was scratchy but audible. Roger, Nakamura. Confirm you have located all 3 missing personnel? Affirmative. Team is stable but requires evacuation due to injury and weather conditions. Recommend high-angle rescue operation or specialized mountain rescue team. While maintaining radio contact, Zoe worked with the reconnaissance team to improve their shelter and provide basic medical care to the injured soldier. Her pack contained emergency medical supplies that she shared with the team, along with additional food and water that helped address their immediate needs. The radio conversation revealed that weather conditions had grounded all aircraft and made conventional rescue operations impossible. The base was scrambling to organize a ground-based rescue team, but reaching the ravine location would require specialized equipment and personnel trained in high-angle rescue techniques. Nakamura, what's your assessment of extraction options from your current position? Came the crackling voice through the radio. Zoe studied the terrain around their location, considering factors that other rescuers might not immediately recognize. The ravine system connected to a network of drainage channels that led toward lower elevations and more accessible terrain. While moving the injured team member would be challenging, it might be possible to evacuate them to a location where conventional rescue vehicles could reach them. Base, I'm seeing a possible evacuation route following the drainage system downstream, she transmitted. It would require moving the casualty approximately 1 kilometer over difficult terrain, but it could bring us to an area accessible to ground vehicles. Negative, Nakamura. Do not attempt to move an injured person through hazardous terrain. Maintain your current position and wait for rescue team arrival. The order made sense from a safety perspective, but Zoe could see that weather conditions were continuing to deteriorate. The injured soldier's condition was stable for now, but extended exposure to cold and moisture could lead to serious complications. More importantly, the approaching storm system might make any rescue operation impossible for several days. The evaluation board nodded approvingly as Kane outlined his tactical reasoning and resource requirements. Rodriguez presented a similar assessment with slight variations in search patterns and asset allocation. Both candidates had approached the exercise as a theoretical problem requiring tactical solutions, and their answers demonstrated solid understanding of rescue operations as taught in military training manuals. Where is Candidate Nakamura? Colonel Hayes asked, noting the empty chair at the briefing table. Captain Warren checked her radio communications log before responding. Ma'am, Nakamura made contact approximately 2 hours ago, reporting that she had located the missing reconnaissance team. Her last transmission indicated she was implementing an unauthorized evacuation plan against direct orders. The silence in the briefing room was immediate and total. Kane and Rodriguez exchanged glances that mixed surprise with a certain satisfaction at their competitors. Apparent self-destruction. She disobeyed direct orders? Colonel Hayes asked, her voice carrying the dangerous calm that preceded significant. Disciplinary action. Yes, ma'am, Warren confirmed. She was explicitly ordered to maintain position and await rescue team arrival. Instead, she reported implementing an immediate evacuation plan and then ceased radio contact. Kane couldn't resist commenting on his rival's apparent failure. Colonel, with respect, this confirms concerns about candidate Nakamura's judgment. Under pressure. Real rescue operations require following command protocols and working within established safety procedures. Rodriguez nodded in agreement. Improvising evacuation plans without proper authorization could endanger both the rescue team and the personnel being rescued. Military operations depend on discipline and following orders. Their criticism seemed reasonable and professionally motivated, but Colonel Hayes was studying the situation with the analytical perspective of someone who had commanded rescue operations in actual combat zones. Something about the circumstances didn't align with the conventional explanations being offered. Captain Warren, what were the specific weather conditions when Nakamura made her last transmission? Warren consulted her meteorological reports before answering. Ma'am, we were experiencing deteriorating conditions with increasing snowfall and wind speeds approaching the limits for helicopter operations. The forecast called for a major storm system moving through the area over the next 6 to 12 hours. And our planned rescue team deployment timeline. Earliest possible deployment would be approximately 4 hours from now, assuming weather conditions don't deteriorate further. If the storm intensifies as predicted, we might not be able to reach the area for 24 to 48 hours. Colonel Hayes absorbed this information while studying the tactical maps that showed the search area and surrounding terrain. Her years of experience in command positions had taught her to recognize situations where conventional procedures might prove inadequate or even dangerous. Captain Warren, I want continuous monitoring of all radio frequencies for any communication from Nakamura or the reconnaissance team. Also, prepare a backup rescue team in case weather conditions permit immediate deployment. The briefing continued with detailed discussion of Kane's and Rodriguez's exercise performance, but Hayes found herself distracted by questions about Nakamura's situation. The candidate had either made a catastrophic error in judgment or recognized something about the circumstances that her competitors had missed entirely. 2 hours after her last radio transmission, Zoe's voice crackled through the communications center at Fort Ridgeway. Her signal was weak but audible, carrying the exhausted satisfaction of someone who had accomplished something difficult and important. Base, this is Nakamura. I have successfully evacuated the reconnaissance team to the service road intersection, approximately 3 kilometers southeast of the original search coordinates. Casualty is stable and ready for immediate medical transport. Request ambulance and medical team at these coordinates. The communications operator nearly dropped his microphone in surprise. Nakamura, confirm you have all 3 reconnaissance team members at a vehicle-accessible location. Affirmative. Johnson requires immediate medical attention for a leg fracture, but all team members are stable and ready for pickup. We beat the worst of the storm by about 30 minutes. Within minutes, rescue vehicles were racing toward the coordinates Zoe had provided. The ambulance crew found the reconnaissance team exactly where she had indicated, with the injured soldier properly stabilized and the entire group in remarkably good condition considering their ordeal. The evacuation had been executed with textbook precision, demonstrating exactly the kind of adaptive problem-solving and environmental awareness that CSAR operations demanded. More importantly, it had been accomplished under conditions that would have made conventional rescue operations impossible or extremely dangerous. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the base medical officer who treated Johnson, later submitted a report that praised the field medical care he had received. The improvised stabilization and transport techniques used during this evacuation were exemplary. The patient arrived in stable condition with proper immobilization of his injury and no signs of cold-related complications. Her medical assessment contradicted Kane's and Rodriguez's assumption that moving an injured person through difficult terrain would automatically result in additional complications or injuries. Master Sergeant Frank Coleman, a veteran instructor who had remained silent during most of the exercise debriefings, finally spoke up during the evaluation board's discussion of Nakamura's performance. "Colonel, I've been running rescue training for 15 years, and I've seen candidates who could follow procedures perfectly, but couldn't adapt when conditions changed. I've also seen candidates who understood that sometimes saving lives requires taking calculated risks that don't appear in any manual." His endorsement carried significant weight with the evaluation board, particularly because Coleman was known for maintaining strict standards and rarely offering positive assessments unless they were thoroughly deserved. "What's your assessment of Nakamura's actions, Sergeant Coleman?" Colonel Hayes asked. "Ma'am, she demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and environmental awareness that we need in real operations. Her decision to ignore orders wasn't reckless insubordination. It was tactical leadership based on superior understanding of the situation." Kane and Rodriguez listened to this discussion with growing unease. The exercise they thought they had won through proper procedure and conventional thinking was being reframed as a test of adaptive leadership that they had completely missed. But the real revelation came when Colonel Hayes reviewed the detailed timeline of events and compared it with weather data from the exercise period. Nakamura's evacuation had been completed just minutes before weather conditions deteriorated, to the point where any rescue operation would have been impossible. Her unauthorized action hadn't just been tactically sound. It had been the only approach that could have saved the reconnaissance team before the storm made their location completely inaccessible. The woman her fellow candidates had dismissed as too slow and too analytical had demonstrated exactly the kind of rapid decision-making and environmental intuition that separated competent soldiers from exceptional rescue operators. But her vindication was only beginning. What Colonel Hayes and the evaluation board were about to discover would force a complete reassessment of their training program and challenge every assumption about what made an effective combat search and rescue specialist. The investigation that followed would reveal that Nakamura's success hadn't been lucky improvisation. It had been the result of months of preparation and analysis that her competitors had dismissed as irrelevant academic exercise. More importantly, it would establish a new standard for how the military evaluated candidates for its most demanding rescue specialties. The woman who had been labeled a misfit was about to become the template for a new generation of rescue professionals. As snow continued falling on Eagles Peak and weather conditions reached the severe levels that Zoe had predicted, 3 soldiers owed their lives to someone who understood that sometimes the most important military skill was knowing when not to follow orders. 3 weeks after the training exercise that should have ended her career, Zoe found herself in the most unlikely position imaginable. Instead of facing disciplinary action for disobeying direct orders, she was sitting in Colonel Hayes' office while being offered a role in developing new training protocols for the CSAR program. The irony wasn't lost on her that her supposed failure had become the foundation for reimagining how the military prepared rescue specialists. "Your unauthorized evacuation demonstrated capabilities that our current evaluation system doesn't adequately measure," Colonel Hayes explained, reviewing a thick file of after-action reports and medical assessments. "The question now is whether you're interested in helping us fix that problem." The offer represented everything Zoe had hoped to achieve when she first applied for CSAR training, but it came with complications that extended far beyond her personal career aspirations. Kane and Rodriguez, along with several other candidates, had formally complained about the preferential treatment they believed she was receiving despite her violation of military protocols. Their grievances had merit from a procedural standpoint. Military effectiveness depended on discipline and following orders, and any system that rewarded insubordination could undermine the command structure that held units together under extreme pressure. Yet the undeniable success of Zoe's evacuation operation forced leadership to confront uncomfortable questions about whether their training methods adequately prepared candidates for real-world challenges. "Ma'am, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm concerned about the precedent this sets," Zoe replied carefully. Other candidates followed proper procedures and deserve recognition for that discipline. Hayes nodded approvingly at her response. "That's exactly the kind of balanced judgment we need in developing new training standards. This isn't about excusing insubordination or promoting reckless behavior. It's about recognizing that effective rescue operations require analytical thinking and environmental awareness that our current program doesn't adequately test." The conversation was interrupted by Captain Warren's urgent knock on the office door. Her expression carried the particular tension that accompanied genuine emergencies rather than training scenarios. "Colonel, we have a real-world situation developing," Warren announced without preamble. 3 members of an advanced mountaineering class are overdue from a winter survival exercise on Eagles Peak. Weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly, and we're looking at a potential SAR mission under extremely challenging circumstances. Hayes immediately shifted into operational mode, her demeanor transforming from thoughtful discussion to focused command authority. "What's our current asset availability?" "Ma'am, the storm system has grounded all aircraft indefinitely. Ground-based rescue teams could reach the general area, but the specific location where the mountaineers were last seen is accessible only through technical climbing routes that would be extremely dangerous under current conditions." The situation presented exactly the kind of challenge that had defined Zoe's controversial training exercise, but with the added complexity of actual lives at stake rather than simulated scenarios. Weather conditions on Eagles Peak were approaching the limits of human endurance, and any rescue operation would require personnel capable of functioning effectively in an environment that could kill experienced mountaineers within hours. "Who do we have available with advanced winter rescue capabilities?" Hayes asked, mentally cataloging the specialized skills required for high-altitude operations in severe weather. Warren consulted her personnel roster before responding with obvious reluctance. "Ma'am, most of our qualified personnel are deployed or unavailable due to the holiday schedule. Kane and Rodriguez both have winter operations experience, but neither has specific training in technical rescue operations." Hayes studied the tactical situation while weighing options that all carried significant risks. Deploying inadequately. Trained rescuers could result in additional casualties, but delaying action might doom the missing mountaineers to death by exposure. What about the instructors? Coleman has extensive mountain rescue experience. Sergeant Coleman is currently on emergency leave dealing with a family medical situation. He's not available for immediate deployment. The conversation between Colonel Hayes and Captain Warren went on for several more minutes, growing more urgent as they ran through increasingly limited options. Every trained rescue specialist was either out of reach or lacked the specific skills required for the harsh conditions on Eagles Peak. Zoe remained silent through the exchange, but her mind was already at work, analyzing the terrain and environmental variables that would influence any rescue effort. Her months of studying the area around Fort Ridgeway, including the difficult landscape of Eagles Peak, meant she had valuable insight others might overlook. Quietly, she spoke up. "Colonel, I've spent a lot of time analyzing Eagles Peak weather patterns, terrain features, If the issue is availability, I might be able to assist with rescue planning. Both Hayes and Warren turned to her, surprised but intrigued. Zoe was still a trainee, not an officially certified rescue operator, but her performance in recent exercises had gone far beyond expectations. "What's your assessment of current conditions on Eagle's Peak?" Hayes asked, testing whether Zoe's offer came from real expertise or misplaced confidence. Zoe opened her notebook, filled with meticulous notes and diagrams. "Ma'am, the storm system is moving faster than initially expected. High winds and heavy snowfall are creating avalanche risks along the main access routes. But there's a secondary route on the eastern side, through a drainage area that should stay relatively stable, even under these conditions." She backed up her analysis with maps and detailed weather data, evidence of months of careful study. Warren and Hayes exchanged a glance, recognizing how thorough her preparation was. "The missing mountaineers were training near the summit," Warren added, glancing at operational files. "That's about 2,000 feet above base elevation cliff faces, full weather exposure." Zoe nodded. "Yes, ma'am. But if they followed standard emergency protocols, they would have descended when the weather turned. There are several natural shelters along the eastern slope they likely could have reached." Her prediction combined her deep knowledge of the mountain with an understanding of how trained climbers would behave under stress. After a moment's deliberation, Hayes made her decision. "Nakamura, I'm authorizing you to assist in rescue planning. Your environmental analysis and terrain expertise could be vital." The assignment marked a significant milestone for Zoe. It was an unprecedented opportunity, but it also meant lives would depend on the accuracy of her assessments. Within an hour, she was in the operations center, working alongside Kane and Rodriguez to develop a detailed rescue plan. The dynamics had shifted since their last interaction. Kane, once openly dismissive, now regarded Zoe with reluctant respect. Rodriguez, too, approached her ideas with serious attention. "Nakamura, what do you make of the approach routes given the latest forecast?" Kane asked, scanning the maps. "The direct paths are too dangerous, too much avalanche risk." Zoe replied, laying out a series of topographic maps. "But the eastern drainage route is shielded from the worst weather and should remain passable." Rodriguez examined the proposed route. "It's longer, but it gets us close to the search zone and looks safer overall." The tension between them had eased. The reality of a real rescue had pushed them into collaboration. Competing agendas were replaced with a shared focus: saving lives. Master Sergeant Williams, recalled from leave for the mission, reviewed the plan with a practiced eye. "The eastern route is safer, but the final ascent will require technical rope work. Steep terrain, no easy access." That introduced a new challenge. Rope rescue demanded specialized skills and equipment. "I've completed advanced rope rescue training," Zoe said, producing credentials from her communications background. High-altitude antenna work required similar techniques: climbing, rigging, stabilization. "I've done this before." Her admission surprised both Kane and Rodriguez, who hadn't realized her technical expertise extended beyond communications systems. It changed how they viewed her yet again. The final rescue plan drew on all their strengths: Zoe's environmental precision, Kane's tactical leadership, and Rodriguez's mountaineering experience. It was a well-rounded strategy, but then the situation shifted again. An updated weather report brought bad news. The storm was intensifying faster than expected. Conditions would become unmanageable in just a few hours. "We've got a 3 to 4 hour window," Captain Warren announced. "After that, the mountain will be closed to any rescue attempts." The timeline forced fast, high-stakes decisions. Every minute spent refining the plan took time away from the actual mission. But launching unprepared could mean losing both the mountaineers and the rescue team. Colonel Hayes gave the final order: "Deploy now. Use Nakamura's eastern approach. Kane will lead." Nakamura will handle navigation and technical operations. The decision validated everything Zoe had worked for. But now, theory would meet reality in the harshest way possible. As they loaded gear and ran final checks, Zoe felt the familiar mix of anticipation and nerves. This was no longer a simulation. The lives of the missing climbers and her own team depended on the decisions she had made. Her months of preparation and study had led to this moment, but success would depend on her ability to translate academic understanding into effective action when lives hung in the balance. Kane approached her as they loaded their packs with specialized rescue equipment. "Nakamura, I owe you an apology for how I treated you during training. Your approach to operations has value that I didn't recognize." His acknowledgement represented personal growth that extended beyond simple professional courtesy. The competitive environment of military training often prevented candidates from recognizing the diverse skills and perspectives that their peers brought to challenging situations. "We all have different strengths," Zoe replied diplomatically. "The key is figuring out how to combine them effectively for mission success." Rodriguez joined their conversation as they completed final equipment checks. "Whatever happens out there, we're going in as a team. No more individual competition, just focus on bringing those mountaineers home safely." Their unity represented a transformation that went far beyond the specific rescue operation they were about to undertake. Three candidates who had entered training with conflicting approaches to military operations had learned to value each other's contributions and work collaboratively toward shared objectives. As they boarded the transport vehicle that would take them to the base of Eagles Peak, Zoe looked back at Fort Ridgeway with the understanding that everything in her military career had led to this moment. The woman who had been dismissed as too analytical and insufficiently aggressive was about to demonstrate that sometimes the most important battles were won through preparation, knowledge, and the courage to trust your expertise when others doubted its value. The rescue operation that awaited them would test every assumption about leadership, teamwork, and what it meant to be ready for anything the mountains could throw at determined rescuers willing to risk everything for people they had never met. The storm hit Eagles Peak with a fury that transformed the mountain into a living weapon of ice and wind. Visibility dropped to mere feet as Zoe led Kane and Rodriguez through the eastern drainage route she had mapped from countless hours of study. Every step forward was a calculated risk, every decision a potential difference between success and catastrophe. "Nakamura, how much further to the search area?" Kane shouted over the howling wind, his voice barely audible despite being only arm's length away. Zoe checked her compass and altimeter, cross-referencing them with landmarks she could barely make out through the blowing snow. Approximately 400 meters to the first potential shelter location. If they followed emergency protocols, this is where we should find signs of their passage. Her navigation was proving accurate in ways that impressed even Rodriguez, whose initial skepticism about her technical skills had evaporated during their methodical ascent. The route she had selected avoided the worst avalanche zones while providing regular opportunities for shelter and regrouping. There, Zoe pointed toward a barely visible rock formation that offered protection from the direct wind. Natural windbreak, southeast exposure for maximum warmth. If they're experienced mountaineers, they would have recognized this as a strategic location. The team pressed forward through knee-deep snow that threatened to exhaust them before they reached their objective. But Zoe's conditioning, built through years of carrying heavy communications equipment across difficult terrain, proved more durable than Kane's raw strength or Rodriguez's athletic training. At the rock formation, they discovered the first evidence that the missing mountaineers had passed this way. Equipment marks in the snow and disturbed rocks indicated that someone had sheltered here recently, though continuing snowfall had obscured most details. "Fresh signs," Rodriguez confirmed, examining the area with techniques learned during his tracking training. 3 people, moving upslope toward the technical climbing areas. Zoe studied the evidence while calculating time factors and weather progression. They passed through here approximately 6 to 8 hours ago, before conditions became critical. If they continued toward the planned climbing area, they would have been caught in the worst of the storm. The implications were sobering. Even experienced mountaineers could survive. Only limited exposure to the temperature and wind conditions, currently battering the upper elevations of Eagles Peak. Every minute of delay reduced the chances of finding the missing team alive. "We need to move faster," Kane declared, shouldering his pack with renewed urgency. "Time is working against us." But Zoe recognized environmental factors that Kane's aggressive approach might overlook. "Sir, pushing too hard in these conditions risks creating additional casualties. Better to arrive capable of conducting an effective rescue than to reach the area too exhausted to help anyone." Her counsel proved prophetic as they encountered increasingly treacherous terrain that required careful navigation and technical rope work. Kane's initial impulse to charge forward through every obstacle was tempered by Zoe's systematic approach to risk management. When they reached a section where the route required rappelling down a steep rock face obscured by blowing snow, Zoe's technical expertise became indispensable. Her years of installing communications equipment in challenging locations had taught her rope techniques that exceeded the basic mountaineering skills of her teammates. "I'll establish the anchor points and test the route," she offered, already assembling the specialized hardware required for safe descent. "Once I confirm the setup, you can follow with confidence." Kane watched her work with growing respect for capabilities he had never recognized during their training. Her movements were precise and economical, demonstrating the kind of technical mastery that came from extensive real-world experience rather than classroom instruction. "Nakamura's right about the systematic approach," he admitted to Rodriguez as they prepared to follow her descent. "Rushing through technical sections could get us all killed." The revelation represented a fundamental shift in Kane's understanding of effective leadership. Military operations often required aggressive action and rapid decision-making, but mountain rescue demanded different qualities that Zoe possessed in abundance. Their descent brought them to a protected alcove where they discovered more substantial evidence of the missing mountaineers. A makeshift shelter constructed from emergency bivouac gear showed clear signs of recent occupation, including the remains of a small warming fire. "They were here within the last few hours," Zoe assessed, examining the shelter construction and fire placement. 3 people, 1 possibly injured, based on the arrangement of the sleeping area. Her analysis proved accurate when Rodriguez discovered a message scratched into the rock face near the shelter entrance. "Continuing to Summit Shelter, medical emergency, send help." The message changed the entire dynamic of their rescue operation. Instead of searching for lost mountaineers who might be anywhere within a large area, they now had specific intelligence about their location and condition. More importantly, they knew that at least one member of the missing team required immediate medical attention. Summit Shelter is another 1,000 feet of elevation gain, Kane calculated, studying his topographic map. In these conditions, that's going to be extremely challenging. Zoe had anticipated this possibility and prepared accordingly. "The approach route I mapped includes a protected ascent corridor that should remain stable even under severe weather conditions. We can reach the Summit Shelter, but we need to move immediately before conditions deteriorate further." Her confidence was based on months of studying weather patterns and terrain features around Eagles Peak, knowledge that was now proving crucial for mission success. While Kane and Rodriguez possessed superior physical strength and tactical training, Zoe's environmental expertise was the key factor enabling their rescue operation. The final ascent tested every aspect of their training and endurance. Wind speeds approached dangerous levels while temperature continued dropping toward life-threatening extremes. But Zoe's route selection and pacing proved exactly right for the conditions they encountered. When they finally reached the summit shelter, they found the missing mountaineers in critical condition, but alive. One team member was unconscious with signs of severe hypothermia, while the other two were barely conscious but responsive to verbal commands. Medical emergency confirmed. Zoe transmitted to base operations, her radio crackling with static, but maintaining sufficient signal strength for communication. 3 casualties, 1 critical, all requiring immediate evacuation. The rescue that followed demonstrated the value of thorough preparation combined with adaptive leadership. Kane's tactical experience proved invaluable for organizing the cause. Evacuation. Rodriguez's mountaineering skills enabled safe movement of injured personnel, and Zoe's environmental knowledge guided them through a descent that would have been impossible under normal procedures. Their return journey took 4 hours of careful movement through conditions that continued to deteriorate throughout the night. But Zoe's route selection and timing proved exactly right, bringing them to safety just as weather conditions reached levels that would have made rescue operations impossible. The medical team that treated the rescued mountaineers later confirmed that their survival had depended entirely on the timing and effectiveness of the rescue operation. Any delay of more than a few hours would have resulted in fatalities, while the specific medical care they received during evacuation had prevented serious complications from hypothermia and altitude-related injuries. Colonel Hayes conducted the after-action review personally, recognizing that the successful rescue operation had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything shown during formal training exercises. This operation succeeded because team members contributed complementary skills and trusted each other's expertise in their areas of specialization. Her assessment represented official validation of the collaborative approach that had emerged from their shared challenge. Kane, Rodriguez, and Zoe had learned to function as an integrated team rather than competing individuals, and their collective effectiveness had saved 3 lives under extremely demanding circumstances. Nakamura, Hayes continued, your environmental analysis and technical capabilities were instrumental in mission success. The route you selected and the timing you recommended were exactly right for the conditions we encountered. Kane stepped forward with a request that surprised everyone present. Colonel, I recommend Nakamura for immediate advancement to instructor status. Her expertise and leadership during this operation exceeded anything I've seen from candidates. At our level, Rodriguez nodded his agreement. Ma'am, she demonstrated exactly the kind of analytical thinking and environmental awareness that we need in advanced rescue operations. Her approach to mission planning and risk assessment should be incorporated into our training curriculum. Their endorsements represented complete transformation from the competitive antagonism that had characterized their initial relationships. The shared experience of conducting a successful rescue operation under extreme conditions had taught all 3 candidates to value each other's contributions and recognize the diverse skills required for effective military operations. 3 months later, Corporal Zoe Nakamura stood before a new class of CSAR candidates as the program's newest instructor. Her curriculum emphasized environmental analysis, systematic risk assessment, and the integration of technical knowledge with tactical decision-making. The training methods she developed would influence military rescue operations for years to come. Kane and Rodriguez had also graduated from the program and were serving as team leaders in operational units, but they maintained regular contact with Zoe and credited her with teaching them approaches to leadership that had made them more effective in their assignments. The woman who had been dismissed as too analytical and insufficiently aggressive had become the foundation for a new generation of rescue specialists who understood that thorough preparation and environmental awareness were not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be cultivated. Her office wall displayed photographs from successful rescue operations conducted by graduates of her program, each image representing lives saved through the application of systematic thinking and careful preparation rather than aggression and raw physical capability. But the most meaningful recognition came in a letter from one of the mountaineers she had rescued during that storm on Eagles Peak. Your decision to trust your knowledge and expertise when others doubted, it saved my life and the lives of my teammates. Thank you for proving that being different isn't a liability when that difference makes all the difference. The mountain that had tested her capabilities and validated her approach continued to challenge new generations of rescue specialists, but they now approached it with knowledge and techniques that honored both courage and intelligence. Sometimes the greatest victories weren't won through force or speed, but through the patience to understand what really mattered and the courage to act on that understanding when everything depended on being right. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.